It's interesting, a couple of times there through describing that phase of your career, you talked about the connections that you made, the network. It's one of my favorite quotes. It's not what you know or who you know, it's who knows you.
Yes.
How did you sort of develop that side of your career, and how much time did you invest in building a network?
I've been really fortunate in, ending up in places where I've been able to work for some wonderful people.
Yep.
There's two particular mentors who I still have now, and I actually spoke to one of them on Sunday this week.
Yeah.
So after Aussiemail, I went to work at David Jones.
Yep.
And at David Jones, a gentleman called Laurie Turner became the CIO there, and I worked for him. And I ended up working for him for the next 13 years. I followed him to Coles Myer down in Melbourne. I worked for him at Optus back in Sydney. I commuted from Sydney to Brisbane to work for him at Horizon. The thing about Laurie is he was a values-based leader before anyone was even talking about that.
Yep.
He is someone who was successful not by climbing over the back of other people, but by treating people with respect. He's a really well-loved executive. He knew everyone's name. He took the time to ask them how they were going. And I learned so much from him in how to form cultures, how to treat people. And you can probably imagine, that earlier part of my career, I had an element of misplaced technical arrogance, and bringing everyone along, letting them be the best person they can and make the contribution they can because you created the space for them to do that. I very much learnt that from Laurie. And to your point, that there seems to be a large number of companies on my CV. There's only one person for 13 years of that. And he's been a wonderful source of advice for me since then as well. And I very much channeled much of what I learnt from Laurie and also from another gentleman, Peter Marler, who was the group CIO at Coles Myer.
Yep.
Peter was a really brave CIO. He put his chest out and went into any fight. He was great at marketing. He was really focused on that. And he had a phrase that I loved. It was, when you're successful, no one will remember how much it cost. And both he and Laurie, I've very much channeled the lessons I've learned from them into my role at Newcrest as the CIO. And on day one at Newcrest in the CIO role, which happened about a year after I started, I talked about working for them. I said, these are some great teams I've been a part of, and I want to create a team here like that. Let's talk about what kind of team we want to be, what kind of leaders we want to be. And, very much, it's a cornerstone of what I've brought forward in my career.
Yeah, fantastic. So if someone is sort of listening to this and looking for some advice around how to find a mentor, or what attributes makes a good mentor in your opinion?
I think someone who, first off, I'm conscious as well that every interaction you need to create value both ways.
Yep.
So it's not just, I think there's the flattering moment of someone actually wanting your advice, which is great, but also being conscious about how you can contribute to them.
Yep.
And seek out people who maybe aren't like you. We tend to attract people that are similar to us sometimes.
Yeah.
And finding someone who's going to challenge you, or maybe tell you that you're wrong, or that you're not seeing it right, or that you maybe need to see it another way, I think is really important.
Yeah, great. Okay. And I think I'm a big believer that we're shaped by the feedback that we receive. And often that comes from our mentors through that journey. What would you say has been the most significant feedback that you've received in your career?
Actually, it's from Laurie. He actually said to me once, this is very early when I was speaking with him, just because you're the strongest, it doesn't mean you have to win all the time. And he then went on to explain that what he meant by that was that I need to create the space for other people to succeed.
Yeah.
And you can't, you succeed as a team and you fail as an individual. So, which I think was really good advice.
Yeah, that's great advice. So you mentioned Newcrest there.
Yes.
And obviously that's been your most recent role. You've been with them for the last 11 years.
Yes.
9 as CIO. And I read somewhere that you joined as 2IC to, is it Carl Duckinson?
Correct.
Is that
yes.
right? Yeah. Were you actually hired specifically as his successor? Was that the plan?
Yeah, that's correct. Actually, I was still working for Laurie in Brisbane at Horizon, and Peter Marlow actually was in town and took me out to lunch. He was coaching Carl Duckinson and some of Carl's team and said, you should come and join Newcrest. You'll be CIO within a year or so. So I took the plunge and moved to Melbourne to take up the role. Although it didn't pan out the way that I expected. About two or 3 months after I started, the gold price fell by 25%, and the whole business was cash flow negative in a significant way. And the IT function went through a very painful restructuring, which saw at site and at group it went from about 360 people to 120 people. And all of my former peers as direct reports to Carl Duckinson, and Carl left the business, and I became CIO with a new team of people who'd never really worked at that level before, but had the wonderful opportunity to apply all the lessons that I'd learned from great people in the past.
Yes, I read about that. I read that when you took over as CIO, you were tasked with building a streamlined function, I think was the phrase that was used. How did you navigate that?
I was conscious that you need to present what you need to the outside world and meet their needs, but I didn't want us to just crawl into the cave and wait out the bad times the company was experiencing. So although we were very cost conscious, and I wanted to flip that around to being value conscious as well. And part of that focus was having a really big focus on metrics. So measuring things, having all of those things to hand, using that to drive the actions. We created a thing that we called the fact base in Newcrest. And that was was a spreadsheet, but now a very long, big digital platform that contains licenses, calls, incidents, SLAs, etc. And I remember after being there a year and doing this, overhearing one of the people who work in the teams explaining to a new person who'd started that before we put the fact base in place, we didn't know we were successful because we didn't measure it, and now we do.
You're right.
And we know we're successful. So that has enabled me to then make the case for value and articulate the value that we're creating. And if you look back through those measurements, we can demonstrate through benchmarking year on year that we are the best in class when it comes to cost. And it doesn't mean that I'm looking for the lowest cost, it's the overall rather than the individual pieces. We can demonstrate that we're aligned with our customers. For the last 7 years, we've been at or above 8 out of 10 for a net promoter score from site general managers. And in mining, site general managers are kings of their kingdom. Sadly, all kings and no queens. But to have that alignment with that cohort and be able to demonstrate that is really important. And finally, we had a business improvement system using the McKinsey Wave tool. Much of what we delivered, largely through our digital investments, were measured in terms of returns, whether that's additional free cash flow or cost avoidance. And over 7 years, we've delivered hundreds of millions of dollars of value to our business. And let me assure you, our CapEx budget was a fraction of that each year. So I think that culture of measurement has enabled us to be able to turn it into a discussion about value, and also meant we've had a track record of delivery that we can point back to, which in turn makes that conversation of why I want to make this investment a lot easier the next time round. And I actually should add, to the credit of the team that I've had the privilege of working with, they're on time, on budget. delivery of projects for years now has been at around about 97%. The worst year we had was 91%, which I'm not aware of anyone in the Australian market who's anywhere near that kind of level of delivery.
I'm not aware of anyone on the planet with that kind of delivery. I think I also read in 1 year you delivered 400 projects.
Yes,
97%, which is an incredible achievement. And you've outlined there some the business tools and the way you've delivered those things. But I also read that your strong focus was on, I think the quote was that the type of team you wanted to be.
Yes.
I just wonder if you could elaborate. What does that mean?
It's very much a values-based team. I think, I'd articulate it as a team that has a strong desire to be successful while getting the care and trust and respect right as well. And I think those behaviours around, wanting to use metrics to define things, trying to be comfortable with uncertainty, which we have to experience all the time, but getting the respect right for the people that we work with has really been the cornerstone of what's made us successful. I often believe that if you get the how right, the what will look after itself. And those values and behaviours that we have very much have been the case. The other thing I also believe is when you're in a senior role, you set the tone, but you don't really own the culture of your team. The people throughout the team own that culture. And although, I mentioned on the first day as CIO, I talked about what kind of team we wanted to be, and I listened to and we captured a lot of that. We actually gave that to a group of people who are on the ground, level 1 employees and contractors who came to be known as our cultural ambassadors. They took some of those thoughts and behaviours that we talked about on that first day, linked them back to Newcrest's 5 values, and those behaviours and values have very much become the thing that drives the how for us. And we actually recognise that through what we call the I Love It Awards. It's living our values in IT. Every quarter, recognising the behaviours that people have displayed. And it's great reading through the nominations that we get from across the whole team, both out at our sites and also at the group level as well. So
the Peter Drucker quote, culture eats strategy for breakfast. I think that's what's kind of going around my head as I'm listening to you kind of describe there the way that you very mindfully, not in a way of what you wanted, but you were very, what's the right word? You watered it, you nourished it, you actually encouraged it to flourish.